Hi, Jason.
Hello, Rihanna.
What is the longest you've kept a plant alive, do you think?
That's a good question. The longest I've kept a plant alive is most likely around 4 years. I have a cacti, a Haworthia, that does very well with neglect, so it has survived my poor parenting for quite a while, longer than most of my other plants.
It's adapted to a harsh environment. It
has. It is a strong and willful plant that refuses to give in.
I don't think I've kept a plant alive past a few months. I don't think it's the plant's fault. I think I'm just like a neglectful parent and a serial murderer of plants. So
you lack a green thumb.
I really do. So I am on the search for a plant I can't kill and I can love. This week, we're learning to foster an herb garden the right way. I reached out to Molly Jameson from the UF Institute of Food and Agricultural Science. She knows a lot about a lot of things that grow in your backyard and the ones that you might want to grow in your kitchen.
I would just try to think of it like it's science, but it's maybe not rocket science. So just, giving it a try, giving it a go, planting some seeds. You'd be surprised how much success you could have, especially with herbs.
Where I've failed to maintain houseplants time and time again, I thought an herb garden might be a good alternative. They're fairly uncomplicated. They're easy to take care of, fragrant and dense. And they're kind of like having a houseplant you can eat.
They do need sunlight, they need water, they need soil, but they are pretty good for a beginner if you're just trying to get into gardening.
First and foremost, we need somewhere to put our herb garden.
Kind of depending on your situation. The big thing is you want it to be in an area that that's convenient for you to go to. If you're cooking something and you want to grab some sprigs of rosemary, you don't want it to be like a challenge to get there. So, as long as it has sunlight, anywhere that's just close to your kitchen.
Wherever you decide to put your herb garden, herbs generally require around 6 hours of direct sunlight a day.
And even if they're not quite getting enough, they might go looking for it.
6 hours of sunlight, I understand, but I think most, if not all, plants that have died by my hand have either been overwatered or underwatered, which is actually pretty common.
Some ornamental plants, a little bit of wilting and that kind of thing is okay for them, but our vegetables and even our herbs, you don't want them to dry out, completely and start to wilt.
What Molly suggests is to not so much worry about the frequency with which you're watering your herbs, but more so to make sure your water reaches.
Stick your finger in the soil. So if you stick your finger down in there, maybe to your second knuckle, and then you start to feel some dryness, that's when you need water.
Okay, we understand the basics of water, soil, sunlight. Let's talk about herbs. Molly sorted herbs into 3 different categories. There are annual herbs, biennial herbs, and perennial herbs. 2 common annual herbs are cilantro and basil.
So an annual is when they complete their life cycle, like in one season, from germination to growing to producing leaves, producing flowers, setting seeds, and they tend to be a little more water and nutrient hungry. They're doing their whole life cycle in one season. So maybe think of it like they're maybe a little more higher maintenance.
We also have biennial herbs, like parsley.
Biennial is where it takes 2 seasons. So for the first season, it's going to be more concentrating on growing leaves, which is great for something like parsley because we really are wanting the leaves. And then there's perennials, and so they are multiple seasons. So thyme, oregano, rosemary, those are perennial herbs. And depending on the herb, they might die back in the winter or even in the summer if it's too harsh for them in the summer. But for the most part, they tend to come back.
Molly emphasizes this point. Remember, do not mourn your oregano just yet. It'll probably be back next season.
It's possible that they could not come back. Some of these perennial herbs, if you aren't watering as much or it's particularly hot or they get outgrown by weeds or something, but a lot of them can stay dormant underground. And so give them their time, keep this area watered occasionally, and they should come back.
So you've grown your herb garden and now it's time to harvest. You can eat them fresh, but Molly suggests drying your herbs for a stronger scent and flavor.
Air drying herbs can be just a real easy way to dry them. Of course, we are very hot and humid around here, so making sure that if you cut off some herbs and you want them to dry, give them good air circulation, maybe a light fan. It takes about maybe a couple weeks, and then once they've gotten kind of crispy, put them in like a sealed jar in an area away from sunlight, and that way you'll actually have fresh herbs or dried herbs that were fresh from your garden, and they'll actually gain more flavor as they sit there.
Say you find out you really like herb gardening. You don't need to go out and get more seeds to scale it. All you need are cuttings of your plant.
Yeah, a lot of the perennial herbs are really easy to take cuttings from. Let's take rosemary, for example. If you go to a growing rosemary plant and you find some of the just tender stem on a rosemary, cut off, make it like 3 or 4 inches long, cut off that stem, like where it's still kind of tender, so not too woody, and then take off some of those bottom leaves, get some nice some just potting mix that's moist. And sometimes you could use a rooting hormone. It's like a little powder that you can put the stem in if you feel a little bit like it might not work, but you don't even need the rooting hormone. But if you could get some of that, it just stimulates root production. So rooting hormone or none, you just put it in the soil, and really just keep the soil wet and moist, and kind of put it in kind of an indirect sunlight area so it's not getting too stressed. And if you keep that soil watered, you'd be surprised. It'll start taking root, and then eventually, once you notice that it's not like falling over and it's more stable, put that into a bigger pot, and then you have a rosemary plant. You should really try it.
As cool as they are, cuttings are not a one-size-fits-all method. If we're working with basil and cilantro, seeds are still preferred. Basil and cilantro will produce seeds at the end of their life cycle, but before that, they'll start to flower. Cilantro, in particular, when it gets about above 75 degrees, the herb does something called bolting, which is just flowering very quickly. And once they flower, all of that energy is going towards maintaining that flower instead of growing leaves. And the leaves are what we want. So as much as it may hurt, you have to snip the flowers.
Yeah, exactly. No flowers on a lot of these herbs. Of course, the exception being if you're wanting to go to seed to harvest seed later.
The season cycle has come to an end and you've harvested all of your herbs. But don't worry, next season it'll start all over again. Thanks for listening to Speaking Of, the Unbothered edition from WFSU Public Media. New episodes drop every Thursday, and you can find them wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking Of is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation.